Am I hearing correctly that this problem is growing exponentially, or it has over the last decade or two? Is that accurate?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
In regards to, I believe it was Ms. Cooper that cited Google as really making some efforts to get after this. Why has Snapchat become so prevalent in the spread of CSAM?
Because Snapchat's a platform that's very popular with children. And so any platform where children will congregate, offenders will also congregate.
Ms. Cooper, so this is growing, and we're trying to get to the enforcement end of this, correct? Is there something missing in society that we're not getting to the root of this problem? What is driving this? Are there other efforts that you... So I want to thank you for what you're doing here and the efforts that you're putting forward, but is there a root problem here that we really need to get after also?
I'll answer that briefly and then hand it over to Timmy. I think that there's some recent research that was done by one of the largest medical journals, and there's a myth that people think that if you are sexually abused as a child, particularly as a boy, that you're going to grow up and become an offender, right? And that's actually not true. Boys that are survivors of this are probably less likely to become offenders than the general population. But there's one study that was a longitudinal study. It was actually studied over, I think, 60 years. And what they found was that the increased risk is actually physical violence against boys. So boys that are beaten up in childhood tend to have a much higher risk of sexual offending. But I'm gonna go ahead and let Timmy answer the rest.
Well, if I could, I just want to touch on what was just mentioned and why Homeland is so important to this. So for those 50,000 boys and girls, when they're doing an investigation, they have no idea where that is. They have no idea if that is in Jacksonville, Florida, if it's in Minneapolis, if it's in Chile. And so why Homeland Security working with Interpol is so important is because of all the SAC offices and the 93 attaché offices and the Interpol working in 68 countries and so many countries working together is wherever that leads, they have the opportunity to then act on the other end. And if not, then the boundaries and jurisdiction stop you from being able to follow where that lead is. And that's one of the reasons why Operation Renewed Hope is so successful, is because they have so many people from all over working together to wherever that leads. They have the opportunity to be able to rescue a boy and girl and maybe put a bad guy away.
Mr. Cole or Mr. Madsen, do you believe there should be changes made to Section 230 of the Telecommunications Code?
I think liability, or the lack of liability on the tech companies is troubling. I think that I understand the provision and why that was created, but what it's turned into is something it was not meant to be. And when platforms can turn a blind eye to the content, then that's troubling. And so I think we need to have regulation that requires that the tech companies are searching for and protecting children who are on these platforms. If the same things were happening in a physical world environment, then we would shut that down. There's all kinds of things that would happen, but because it's in a virtual space and because of Section 230, parents are helpless to hold anyone accountable.
Mr. Chairman, we heard the same thing months ago. Perhaps it was in this subcommittee, perhaps before the full committee, where we heard from that a vice president for Facebook was deliberately evading the law to enable illegal immigration into this country. And we continue to see this where there's these great concerns, and Mr. Gates touched on it just briefly, that our intelligence agencies are failing us here in America. Whether it's the FBI, the Department of Justice, or others, they are simply failing America in going after these problems. And I give great credit to the four folks that are before us today for making a positive impact in regards to this. But the FBI and DOJ, rather than going after Catholics in various dioceses around the country, rather than doing going after school board members. They should be going after these type of people. This should be a priority of theirs, and it's not. Thank you all for joining us today.
Gentleman's time is expired.